problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin, as usual, every Thursday night. Have you seen the world shift again? Yes, we have. Carbon taxes start in Canada. And for those of you out there, it's 23%. So anything that is fertilizer-based, gasoline, natural gas, propane, anything in that arena, and the knock-on products, 23%. Just increase in magical tax overnight. Imagine the cost of living on that. We got the bird flu. They're culling millions of birds. 2% of United States egg production is going to go offline here this week or more, depending. Oil's above $90 magically because of the Middle East tensions, and it does seem like the amplification phase is here. And then we got all this craziness with the fear factor of the eclipse. I don't know how much fear can be put into a ritual, but please remember, what is happening is an occultist ritual. The invasive hominid species is performing a ritual on the 8th. They need your compliance and voluntary input of your low vibratory energies and emotions into this ceremony. And by allowing all of this unchecked ridiculousness of what's going to happen on the 8th, you're voluntarily helping them accomplish goals by harvesting this energy off of humanity. So I would just say 2 words: stop it. All of you influencers out there pushing this dark ridiculousness of the world's going to end on the 8th. You're feeding into getting people scared to feed into this globalist cult pulling their ritual on the 8th. Stop it. Talk about how we can push back against this by using positive, higher vibration energies so we don't willingly give them what they need to amplify whatever is happening on different parts of this planet as the occultist rituals go on and it swirls on an XYZ axis here, which I'll talk about. So anyway, Ransom, I'm glad you're here tonight. A lot to go over. I am in Taiwan still, and yes, I experienced the quake. We were down in the southern part of the island, so I only got like 4.5, 4.5 on the shake. Everywhere else up north was damaged more severely, I should say, and the landslides were tremendous. And the eastern part of the island's closed off, and it's going to be for some months until they get it cleaned out. Over here in the west, everything's functional now. Finally, the train started running just last night. Airport's back open again, and it was always open down here in Kaohsiung, but up near Taipei, they closed everything because, they had to inspect. High-speed rails are back open finally. The electricity's turned back on again, and the communications are not as spotty because the last 2 days, it's been hit or miss. Like Ransom, you and I having the show might even be difficult because the internet code going on and off and on and off, as would be expected, communications difficulties after a big quake like that. But anyway, man, hope you're doing well, and let's get it on.
No, man, it was totally the eclipse, man. That's why you guys had the earthquake over there.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, people are going nuts about the eclipse. You would think that we lived in like 536, the year that everybody was freaked out back then when the earth really got dark with the way people are acting. But it's just another chance for the establishment to really sidetrack everyone, distract everyone, pump them full of irrational fear. There's everything from religious prophecies trying to be connected to this, to clandestine government operations, to terrorist cells that may or may not be taking advantage of large quantities of people centralized in a location on a map that you can clearly see. As a matter of fact, here I'm going to put that up there for everybody so they can see it. it's an interesting path. And, I had plans to go see it. We haven't made up our minds exactly if we're going to go do that. We usually go to these events, but like I said, they're trying to do some weird stuff. And, sometimes when ideas get put in people's heads, like if somebody jumped off the Empire State Building back before they put the blockage on there would be like 3 or 4 other people in the city that would try to emulate and do the same thing. And I know that they know that. So why they would be calling up the National Guard and telling people to stockpile food and resources for weeks. I mean, think about this. This is a thing that lasts several hours, that goes across the U.S., and they're telling people that, not that it's a bad idea to stockpile food or anything. I mean, we tell you the same thing, but not because of a solar eclipse, right? Something that's just going to last a few hours, but they really have everybody pumped. The National Guard is activated in several states. And, who knows, that in the ancient past, people would go nuts during these events. And it's starting to look like, with the signs of the times, that we haven't moved much further than like the 4th century or the 5th century or something like that, as far as the general public's ability to get all in a, mass hypnosis state when anything like this happens. Vikings used to go out and beat their shields and swords, screaming at it so it would go away, and all kinds of different beliefs around the world that revolve around the eclipse, from esoteric stuff, to each and individual little group of human beings throughout time had probably their own beliefs. But it's just a shadow. We know that now as modern people. So to get freaked out over a shadow, like the proverbial term, they're afraid of their own shadow. Well, I guess they're afraid of the moon's shadow. It does have a large, crossing on the United States. So everybody's going to get to see a little piece of it from Maine all the way down into Mexico. So it's going to be a pretty big event. And it should be, generating revenue and being, celebrated as something cool. But who knows, with predictive programming out there already, there'll probably be many crazy events happening. I wouldn't doubt that people push the border because, if you live where I live, you'll know that there's been some pretty aggressive pushes against the border. And now we're starting to see clashes between the Texas National Guard and cartel people from Mexico, and they're starting to engage. And this is something that I predicted. This is going to expand. But right over here next to, where is it? I forgot the name. Yeah, there it is. Piedras Negras. This is a spot where a bunch of people are crossing. They have all kinds of weird stuff like shootings and stuff like that. And this is right where the eclipse goes over. Now, I also want to keep in mind that the cartels are in a frenzy right now. They're basically now talking about a civil war in Mexico between the cartels. And get this, what it's over is who gets to charge entry fee to the United States. Just the other day, we had armed Texas National Guard had to come out with weapons and arrest a bunch of people that were cutting their fence into Texas. So it wasn't the federal fence, it was a state fence. And it looked like there was about to be a showdown. Matter of fact, it seems like right around the El Paso area is another one of those where a lot of things, major events happen. And this is one of the spots where, 3,000 people tried to push over the bridge and they ended up arresting like 300 of them and charging them with riot stuff and then letting them go so they could come back to court whenever, because they're totally going to come back to court. Don't worry about it. But yeah, I was glued to the TV when Twitter started popping off posts from Taiwan, and I'm glad you were kind of further away from some of the stuff that I was watching. I don't think that there's a very high death toll. I don't know what it is, but that's part because Taiwan has some really good technology, right? I was reading earlier one of their biggest skyscrapers sits on a giant steel ball and just was basically pivoting back and forth through the whole thing with no risk of falling down. And you compare that with something like Mexico City, And, if you've been paying attention, Popo's getting real active down there. And not to mention that more than one civilization has come and gone and disappeared right over Mexico City. And speaking of which, the eclipse will be pretty much flying right over that. So that's going to be tripped out. A lot of those ancient sites down there where people were worshiping and doing different things during the eclipses are going to get to see that happen in modern times. So I can see how they're using things like this to really pump people up. It almost feels like if you took the general public and you put them in the place of, a hunted animal that was meant to, get a bunch of adrenochrome going in the chase. And it seems like that's what's happening to the general public right now. I mean, you just can't, you cannot look at any type of media without some group or organization or news media outlet telling you that the world is about to burn up in this way, that way, or another way. And, at some point, the general public are going to start to believe it, just like the lie that's told repeatedly. They'll eventually believe it. And, I'm seeing stuff in the background, like, to me, it looks like our economy is about to tank, right? You have the president saying that he doesn't really want to fill up or he's not going to refill the National Strategic Oil Reserve after he depleted it. So, who knows what's going on? It's really going in a bizarre direction. And we have these social engineering people steering things and then also using real events. If you were following the Taiwan Chinese situation and you lived here, you'd be for sure that China was going to invade because Taiwan had the earthquake. I mean, that was the word that was kind of going around, that they were buzzing their airspace and they were also, kind of messing with Japan. But think about that. If China is not going to invade Taiwan during a massive, quake where everybody's in confusion and trying to take care of, infrastructure and make sure things are all right, then it's kind of doubtful that they're going to make that move. So that means to me that they're going to use that as a focal point to just scare the living daylights out of everyone as long as they can. And I remember last week you saying, pretty much that's an American thing that's over here on the news, that they're pumping this idea, and people over there really don't, they're not exaggerating the fear of it over there, because it's an everyday threat that they face since the 50s, right? So if it's not happening, but then again, whenever things do happen, people get caught off guard sometimes. The circus over here, this is what I find funny is this. In 2024, we're going to have all of these events, including the eclipse. It's going to be real memorable, but what people are not paying attention to is what their politicians are getting ready to do to them. And they are working overtime behind the scenes to change everything that there is about this country that we live in here. It's going straight Marxist, and they're putting it full throttle. So we're having this at the same time as different world events are looking like there is going to be a massive food shortage that's engineered. And I'm sure you've been following the next wave of viral, threat to the world, the supposed avian flu that's allegedly jumped from avians to mammals and then to humans, from animals and then to humans. And they've been pumping that up for a long time too. And I've been over here living in New Mexico. We usually have quiet nights, even though I live next to an Air Force base. But lately, they've just been doing practice, if that's what you want to call it, nighttime sorties. They've been, rocking the sonic booms over and over again. So there is a real increased amount of activity, in my opinion. I mean, because I've lived here my entire life, and every time we have some overseas activity like Gulf One, and then after 2001, all of these things, we would see the air traffic between the bases increased like exponentially for a while. And that's exactly what I'm seeing right now, like massive movements of C-130s dropping stuff off or picking stuff up. And they often land here as a waypoint before they go further, like to Tucson or California. And I don't know what's about to happen, but they are pushing the idea that they are going to use the American youth over in Europe. And it seems like they're not going to let that go. So I don't know how that fits in with Taiwan and China. But if China was to do anything, I think that they would wait till things popped off a little hotter in Europe and the United States gets directly involved, which I have a feeling is just about to happen any day now.
Any day now. Well, that's not good. We're still trying to run through Istanbul, and it's interesting being out right now. About the timing, I'd been warned before, hey, you got until May to get back. And I said, okay, we'll plan our trip wisely and maybe back before May. So this does seem like the run-up phase. If you notice, nothing happens like instantaneously. Think about the number of events where it's instantaneous. Like maybe 9/11, there was no run-up and no warning into that. It just like, boom, happened one day. And then it was a world-changing event. But since that time, it's really difficult to find anything that doesn't have a run-up to it. Now, perhaps if you were looking at the news from the Middle East or something, you would have seen the supposed stories of the supposed, opposition to the West that was the supposed faction that hit the planes into the buildings, supposedly. If you want to follow that train of thought on the one report, or you can come over into reality and say, wait a minute, that seemed pretty planned. But if you look at it, everything seems to have this ramp up period to get the most fear out of it. Because the TSMC plant did close down and it is still closed down. So the chip manufacturing currently is halted. I mean, that facility is massive. I mean, massive. Now, it's not as massive as the one which in the United States will be built, but it'll probably be 5 times larger because Taiwan's really constrained with land here. Very expensive to land, ridiculously expensive. Same as Japan. I mean, you're stuck on an island with, an enormous population in a very small space. So things are built vertical. And I've been to the Taipei 101 where you were talking about the ball that's there. That's kind of one of the showpieces. So when you get up to the observation deck, at the top of the building up there, you got to walk past that ball, and that's a huge counterweight lever. And some people were on the floor at the very top on the observation deck during the quake. And there's some videos you can find of that ball swaying back and forth and trying to keep the building in its center position. Now, if it didn't have the ball, I really think that thing, would have much more difficulty. There'd be probably a lot more damage on it. But after what they call the 9/21 quake, which was September 21st, 25 years ago, and like 2,000 people die here in Taiwan. And when they did all the investigations and everything, they found that a lot of contractors were scrimping on materials and filling concrete walls with empty bottles to just fill up the space, right? So if you're a contractor and you want to save money, you don't want to actually use all the bags of concrete that you need to fill up the building. And then they were filling just to volumize that. You think they would have used rocks, which were free also, but they ended up using a bunch of bottles and glass bottles. And when all these buildings came down, like 2,000 people perished that day. So that was the biggest one since. Now, after all the investigations and people went to prison and insurance companies were bankrupted and just a huge amount of chaos at that time, they really got very tight on the building codes. I mean, tight. And even now, a lot of stuff had fallen over, fallen down, broken off. And they are like Inspector Clouseau out with their, magnifying glasses, looking to make sure that everybody was built to code, especially in things that fell down or had more damage to them. Because I saw some pictures of investigators out there checking out the rebar wrap on some of the columns on some places that the outside facade of the columns fell down. The building didn't fall down, but it was like a raining fest across the north part of the island of just huge amounts of debris came down, like huge amounts. tiles, any kind of like gated things over people's windows were shaking off, like plants were falling out of the windows. Smokestacks were collapsing, roofs, any kind of parking garage roofs, all this, anything and everything that could fall off of a building, and even the tiles themselves just shook down. And it was just, everywhere you looked in the news, it was just massive amounts of debris all over the roads. It wasn't that the buildings collapsed, it was like little parts of the buildings kept falling off as this thing was shaking. So inspectors are out in force right now. And anybody caught that was substandard building is absolutely going to prison for the rest of their life. Like, you didn't learn from the first time. We can't have it again. People are going to demand it. And that's the whole thing about people demanding things. So once it gets so bad in a certain direction, people demand that something happens. So it's going to be no different when price of oil skyrockets if there would be a Middle East war, which Israel is really, today telling everybody, if you hit us, even though we bombed your embassy, if you do anything back to us, we're going to start a full Middle East war. That's what they said today. So keep that in your mind, and that's why the oil price rose so quickly. Now, at some point, people are going to demand change because it's going to get so nasty, and people are going to enact the change themselves or demand the change. But the thing is, what I've found so far is it's the same change that the globalists wanted to happen anyway. Like, you look at the European farmers, and we talked about this a couple shows back. World Economic Forum, they would like the food production to curtail, decline, or cease. Completely ceasing is the best option because then they can rewild and reforest areas. But what's happening now? Well, they make conditions so horrendous that farmers are on strike. They're not planting. I'm still trying to get some numbers for everybody, by the way, to see what the percentage of planting will be compared to a normal year. I got some contacts I've reached out to in Europe and asking them, hey, what's going on? What are they really going to plant, or are they not going to plant? All the protests, blocking the roads and ripping cargo out of trucks that were from one country to another, all agricultural products, by the way. It's done by the citizens, not by the army, so nobody's going to get angry. So they've made the same exact accomplished goals, just they made the people carry it out. So what's going to be the thing that gets all nasty now? That they're going to demand, I guess, that we stop driving, or if Biden's not going to refill the strategic reserve, that we need to immediately move to green energy. Like, they're going to make it a condition so horrendous that the citizens are going to demand the change, but it's the same exact change that the WEF crowd wants. Now, with this earthquake over here in TSMC stopping production, now I don't know how long they're going to stop, but that was very, 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 fine-tuned instrumentation and equipment in there. I'm talking, it's going to take them a while to figure it out if anything's damaged. They're going to still try to do factory runs and see what kind of production comes out, but we're talking some of the highest tolerances anywhere in the manufacturing world across the planet was in that factory that just got hit. And see, it was more in the center area, right directly west of where the epicenter of the quake was. So that's going to be down for a minute until they are able to figure out what kind of damage has occurred there. So then the knock-on effect is, well, we won't get some products. Now, where does this go? Is this Middle East war planned? Because you see, there's all kind of this broadcasting, which wraps me back into the point. I'm long-winded sometimes trying to explain the idea. But we have had very, very, very few events that just come out of the blue. 9/11 is really the kind of the last big one I can think. Like the bridge collapse that we just experienced in Baltimore, that'd be another one. But it wasn't to the level of 9/11 that changed the world. But they've been broadcasting this. War is coming with Russia and Ukraine and now the Middle East. It's just been broadcast in this slow trickle of exponential fear to be driven into the populace. And we're seeing it. So what happens if a war does kick off? If just the very rumor of a war drove up oil prices above $90 a barrel for the first time, in a few years here, then what is it going to do when it really kicks off? Are we going to look at $150, $200 a barrel oil? Is that what the play is going to be here? Because as we look at the cryptocurrency space, think about this for a second. All the markets are related. I'm waiting for not a financial advice, but I do think markets are being moved and shaken on purpose here. to take money out of the traditional markets and collapse them during this like fear-based thing, oil, whatever, and then Friday or so run them into the crypto market and watch that thing shake out and take off. So far it looks like the total market is down 1% since this event has taken place. So Ransom, I don't get it, man. Like, they're broadcasting it so cleanly, like they're giving you a timeline to get ready for everything on purpose and also scare everybody and put them into fear. I don't know, are people more controllable? How much more controllable if they think a world war is on tap? But getting rid of the fighting age men here in America is dangerous, because if those men are taken away because they're required to register for the draft, the illegals aren't. They don't even know where they are. So you think they're going to be signing up for the military, be forced by law on a felony to be arrested and thrown in a brig somewhere if you don't volunteer? Like, you get your draft notice and you're like, no. In the old days, people ran to Canada. Can't do that anymore. So let's say they take 20% of all men that are in the age that could be drafted into the Army, even 30%. I mean, what's that going to leave? It's going to leave a giant void of men that could protect the country. And then what you know what happens every time those voids, they're always filled. Nothing is empty in nature. It always refills. Where there's a void, it's always filled in. That's just the way the universe operates. So sending all our boys overseas to get killed in different wars across the Middle East and whatnot leaves us tremendously underguarded here, and the absolute perfect time to be overthrown or invaded within from all these people that are here already. Won't take a minute to guide them to start like doing some nasty stuff inside the states, and there'll be really nobody to. The military will be overseas, the fighting age men will be overseas, and we'll literally be sitting here unprotected with just the women and the children left in the castle with the gates wide open and the invading army at the doorstep or inside the castle. I mean, what are they going to do at that point? So I don't know, this thing kind of stinks to high heaven, the broadcasting of it all. If it would have just happened out of the blue, okay, you know, you can look for further answers, but the continuous progress toward it for me is more of a plan than it is just some hostilities and transference of wealth during this time. So anyway, I was trying to take the point somewhere, but I kind of lost my track.
Yeah, exactly. How are they going to bait all of these kids in there? I've been reading different articles claiming to know what, Generation Z and millennials and Gen X and everybody thinks. And the truth is that most of the large portion of the population of all three of those groups are totally and utterly uninformed about things. So that they rely on whatever mainstream media tells them. And right now, like I said, you could take your pick of fear-mongering tactics, but in the background, like I'm looking, I keep telling you these stories sometimes in private and sometimes not about stuff going around where I live. I live about 90 miles north of the border. And, recently I've known a couple of people that just got murdered for whatever reason. And there's constantly posts about, gangs, robbing people's houses. They're invading their homes. They're stealing their stuff from their sheds or stealing their cars or what's in the car. And, today I was looking at I think it's the top 10 top 10 worst states of crime. And it's New Mexico, Arkansas, Louisiana, Colorado, California, Tennessee, Missouri, South Carolina, Nevada, and Alaska. And you would think, well, why is that? Now, I'm sure each state has their own reason for that. But think about this. Violent crime per capita here where I live is 7.8, which is a lot. That's a lot. That's number one in the nation. We're also number one for property crime and chances for becoming a victim of a violent crime. All of these things. And they know exactly why. And they don't care because I live in a left-leaning state. So it's wide open. If you get in trouble, you can get out and then you can do it again, and then you can get out and you can do it again. And if you happen to not be a local, that is a resident of the state, you can do this even more times with more protection from the state. In other words, if you're a person that's a citizen of a different country, you can get away with more crimes and be released over and over again. And plus, it's wide open. We now know that since Texas is kind of locking up their border to some extent, and Arizona is doing the same, that the main corridor is right here through New Mexico, and it starts in El Paso. And if you remember, a while back in Agenda 2030, there was the North American corridor idea, and they started basically building that in several places. Well, right here is a place where they got away with building it right under everyone's nose. So you have this giant Interstate 25 that crosses with Interstate 10 right there in El Paso, and with an open border, not just a half a mile away from the outskirts of the state of Texas, people are freely flowing back and forth, and the crime is just skyrocketing, and the law enforcement is standing down. So this is just like one part of a whole multi-spectrum phase to make people desperate, basically. And I don't know if you saw that robbery in California where they took $30 million in cash. And, I'm almost guaranteed that is, people that are desperately trying to redistribute their wealth to new places and hide it, because they know that cash is going to go the way of the dodo bird soon. And, if we keep having crime and robberies of different kinds, well, cash is going to become something that's, not something you're going to want to carry around with you. It's not something that you're going to want to store in your home, especially if, people are able to squat or move into your home when you're just gone, or even just home invade you without any real repercussion. And the only repercussions come if you defend yourself against said home intruder. So things are getting really weird. And then now you're talking about what does $100 buy at the grocery store? And Generation Z, as they call it, is figuring out that someone screwed the pooch on them, and then someone screwed it even harder right before they came along. And they're about to live in that. Homeless, not enough money to buy food or pay rent or health insurance or any of these things, car insurance. So what's going to happen is a bunch of really, really poor youth that can't afford to do anything, and they're limited in their resources. So why not take that ticket from Uncle Sam, where you're going to get promised, a GI Bill and a certain amount of sign-on bonus and a guaranteed amount for years and health insurance and all of this. And then they sign up, and then they'll find out, like every other previous generation before them, that when it's all said and done, all of a sudden these programs get pulled back. You don't get paid as much as you were supposed to, or if they paid you, they want it back. And then you also have the idea that they've already legislated where they can just recall people that used to be in the military, and what they call an involuntary activation of their active duty, status. It's an involuntary thing. So they can just call all of those people back up and tell them to go wherever they want. And that includes, guess what? National Guard. So if you were depending on your state to protect your state when the federal government did not protect your state, well, just like under Bush, they can just send those guys overseas and rotate them in an unreasonable amount of deployments until their numbers are, really reduced. And who are we talking about when you're talking about National Guard and older active duty people that get recalled? You're talking about all of the people with the sophisticated skills enough to protect the homeland. I'll just put it that way. These are the people that are a little bit older, that know how to do things, that have all the know-how. And, during the Bush administration, they put those people through the meat grinder until there was a lot less of them. I'll put it that way. So you can see across the board that things are being set up for failure, especially in the Western world. And I'm focusing on the United States. You have California that has gone completely overboard with the amount of social programs to the point where, you know, their streets are lined with homeless people that are addicted to hardcore narcotics that come directly from a country that's a competitor to us. So not to be like hardcore gangster, but if anybody was making money from those illegal things, shouldn't it be the United States? I mean, we've done it before, all through the 80s with the Iran-Contra, and then, you know, again with the Afghanistan and the heroin. It's been right out in our faces. But now you can see who has been given the go-ahead to take the reins on, I'm going to say, deflating the population in advance. And this is a demoralizing campaign that's going on. And the more people realize that things are bad, and that they can't go places without the worry of being robbed by somebody that, you know, where the addictions got to them and they needed whatever they needed. And then everything falls apart. And they know this. And that's what we're seeing is just complete decadence in every major city. But they're also influxing a new amount of millions of people that are not yet addicted or are in bad circumstances. And then when they do the electoral vote or the electoral college here soon, they'll have a bunch more representatives or electoral votes in each of those big blue cities, which will it'll forever change the vote here. If you believe that there ever has been a vote, it will be null and void at that point. And you'll have a uniparty system, which we already have right now, and they seem to be tanking the dollar. So everything seems to be controlled demolition, in my opinion. Like right now, everywhere I look, open border. Let's mess up the oil reserve. Let's, hike the prices of food until people can't afford it. Let's have a housing crisis where there is houses, but they're not really, affordable enough for regular families to buy them. And then let's introduce millions and millions more people that also would like to have a home. And you know what, if your home is trying to sell and you're trying to make money off that, now you have to protect against potential people seizing your property.
Yeah. Now you've seen a lot of the videos of people now. The secret's out. So I mean, this was kind of a phase of itself. So let me go through. If you haven't seen a lot of these videos, they were called like the squatter evictors, and there's a few of them you can watch. This evicting the squatters videos is kind of a popular thing now on the YouTube channels here. To get them out, you don't have to go through all the lawyers and everything. All you need to do is sign a lease with your friend, for example. I would say, all right, man, Ransom, there's a squatter living in my house. I'm going to sign a lease with you for a year. Give me a check for the down payment, which I'll return to you, obviously. And then I give you a lease for 12 months, and then you now have more rights than the squatters. So then you just walk into the house and go, I have a lease with the owner of the house. Y'all are squatting. I got more rights than you now. Get the hell out. So this is the way to go around all that litigiousness, because if you're not going to get anybody rent and you're just trying to get them out, it's going to take forever with the courts the way it is with their favoritism set up. But if you sign up a contractual agreement with another person to go in and rent your property, then that person has way more rights. Now it's a business contractual agreement between two people, which usurps the rights of the squatters. So that's how they're going around it. These guys are just walking around, within days. So it's been a year, we can't get people, and they're like, dude, we can do it in like less than 48 hours. Just sign me a lease. I'll write you a check. You give it back to me with my fee and another check, and then give it to me. Give me the house keys. I'll call the sheriff, and I'll go in with them, and we'll have everything out in 24 hours. So that's the way to do it. If you're hearing my words, if anybody's squatting your property, just have somebody put them on as a new leaseholder, as a new tenant, write out the contract, and give them the keys, and have them call the police as they go in to clean out the house, because they're the new renter. So luckily there's still some laws in favor of ourselves here in the States. So, having a rental contract is one of them. That's a good way to look at this stuff. And this, think about cash, because you brought up cash for a minute. I traveled to India one time. I'm just telling you the countries that I traveled to where they've changed the currency. I'm going to use two easy ones, India and England, and Croatia. All right, so those three nations, I've been there when they had certain currencies and certain denomination of notes. And since that time, those denominations of notes or that currency no longer have any value whatsoever. It's like over in India, they removed the 1,000 rupee note and they left you with very low denomination notes. So I was not there during the currency conversion time, but I knew a guy who was traveling there and was telling me, all the rich people, man, they're paying us a percentage just to stand in line and convert the currency for them, because as a foreigner, they just bring you to the front of the line. You don't have to wait in line. So all they would do is go convert currency all day long to all these different banks around all these different cities, right? That's what they're doing. Not more than it was the minute the bank was open, they were in there trading. And they're like, they made more than enough money to stay on the road for a whole year plus after doing that for just a few days of converting currency for the wealthy people that were there, because they were removing the largest of the banknotes out of circulation. So then it came down to like the 1,000, and I think even the 500 got taken out. Don't quote me on that one, but I know the 1,000 and anything denomination higher. And also Croatia, they used to use the kuna. And then just recently when we were there a few months ago, they converted 100% to the euro. And if you didn't go to the central bank and had cashed in your kunas before the first of the year, they were worth zero. So there was a very last minute push and like huge lines out the door of people waiting for the very last second to convert their kunas. And now that Croatia moved over to the euro, their prices have doubled when they moved out of their native currency over into the euro. And then England also doing away with their banknotes, and the euro also. I forgot to include the euro. Yeah, they did away with their 1,000 euro notes. Remember, they had 5,000, 10,000, 1,500 euro notes. They're all gone now because they don't want you moving that much wealth in one piece of paper, because that's in your wallet. Imagine you have a 10,000 euro note. I mean, how much wealth that would be. Now you're relegated to taking like 100 euro notes, which are quite visible and very easy to see. If you got $10,000 and $100 bills, that's going to be way easier to see in your luggage or scan for than one 10,000 note that you could put in your wallet and walk through a machine with. So they did away with that too. So you couldn't transfer wealth. So that's the fourth place that I've seen it. So if you think that your money in America is going to be good forever just because it's America, I'm telling you from my own eyes and my own seeing that I've been to 4 nations already where their national currencies have changed, or removal of the higher denomination bills. Like in England also, they took away the highest denomination bills. Now the highest you can move around right now is 50. So a 50-pound note is your big boy there now. It used to be way big. They used to have 100-pound, 500-pound, 1,000-pound notes. Again, they did away with all that. So again, you had to go in and convert it. So this is the thing. Same in all the places. When you go in to convert these large amounts of like cash that you had, they're like, where'd you get the money? As soon as you try to convert a large amount of cash, they always hit you with, where'd you get the money? Oh, there's a tax on that. If you can't prove where it came from, then it was like an illegal gain and they just confiscate it. So they're just trying to do whatever with the cash. So be careful. If you're going to go in and think you're going to trade in 50 grand into one lump sum, they're going to ask you where you got all the money. Now going into 5,000 or 8,000, perhaps not. You could say, I've been mowing lawns forever and I had this and whatever. But if you go into 50 grand and try to change it into the new currency, you're going to get a lot of questions and you're probably going to have the money confiscated. And that was what they're finding too, is all these people coming out of the woodwork with big stacks of bills wrapped. They're like, shit, where'd you get that at, man? And, speaking of funds and money, it's just way cheaper to live overseas here than it is in the United States. I mean, it is so prohibitively ridiculous, unbelievable, just madness for the expense to stay in America right now. It is so prohibitively expensive to live there. As soon as you get out, although prices have risen everywhere else too, don't get me wrong, it's just still way cheaper to live overseas and be out of that hornet's nest back there. Because even though I'm working on the road and, I have another place here in Taiwan, it's just cheaper to live over here. Everything just labor, like, something gets broken and you need to get it fixed and you need, somebody with more professional gear. Like we were putting some we were repairing, rebuilt part of the balcony, and then we needed some glass plating on it for the railing, so we didn't want to put wires, so we wanted to use glass. So anyway, I don't have any way to drill glass without breaking it, so we hired some people to come in and do it. And their labor rates were like incredibly, I couldn't believe it when my wife was like, how much you think they charge us? And I was like, almost thinking like borderline American price, something. And they were coming in $30 to $85 an hour or something. And she's no, like $10, you know, to get, and then they do it. And the whole thing is, it's not really $10 an hour. It's by the project. And that's another thing I don't like in the States is every time you try to get somebody to help you do something, they always want to charge you by the hour, which means they're going to slow down so they can get more hours. Here it's by the project, where, you know, when it averages out with their team and everything, they got like 3 guys come in, and one obviously is the foreman, telling the other guys what to do, and they're all installing. And then it comes out to a single price for the project for everybody versus per hour. And that's just on the labor. It's just so ridiculously, you know, I couldn't believe it. I was like, we need to have people come by more often and do stuff. I didn't realize it was that cheap. And then for us, you know, out on the farm, I would love to have another farmhand out there living and, you know, to help us do a bunch of planting and other things that I would like to get done that, you know, 2 people can do some, 3 people can do more, and 4 can do a lot. But here it's just so cheap. You can hire somebody full time for just a little over $1,000 a month to come in as a gardener full time. Like hiring somebody for $1,000 a month full time, like the maids here. You know, because a lot of people that have older grandparents or whatever, they keep them in the house. They don't ship them off to old folks' homes like we do at retirement homes in America. They keep them in the house, stay with the family until the end. So generally they'll have caretakers come in, or a maid, or somebody who works as a caretaker and a maid, like combo. But that position of a full-time live-in assistant is still only like between $1,000 and $1,200, sometimes $1,500, depending if they have like medical, and then they're the maid and they cook and they clean and they do all the. So when you're talking about these types of wages and things, it just everywhere blows away. And this is a very expensive country in Asia to live in Taiwan. I mean, the big expensive ones are, you're looking at Korea, Japan, which is way cheap now. It's 152 yen. I couldn't believe it. Shocked. 152 yen at the newest exchange rate. Normally it's around 100. So they've lost, you know, 50% of the value right there already. So if you're looking at the expensive nations around, you know, Singapore, obviously, Hong Kong's turned into, they passed a couple new laws with censorship laws down there. Or even if you're posting as an overseas citizen, if you're just flying through Hong Kong and you posted negatively about the Chinese government, say 2 years ago, and they find your passport number and they can connect you to it, they'll pull you off the plane in the airport and they'll put you under arrest while you're in the airport, even transiting through. So there's travel warnings out from a lot of embassies. Like if you've ever said anything negative against the Chinese government, look out, because if you're flying through Hong Kong, they can actually arrest you. So that place has really gone down in value. It used to be really expensive there, but people have just abandoned it. It's like becoming just a crappy outpost for China because there's no rule of law. There used to be the business capital along with Singapore, and there's just nothing left there. There's no rule of law. There's no freedom of speech. There's secret police everywhere. It's under surveillance 24/7. You can't say a single thing. And anything you bring in with the IP will instantly be confiscated and stolen. So that place has kind of degraded quite a bit since I've seen it in its heyday. So you're left with a fair few, you know, very wealthy nations in Asia, from Japan to Korea to Taiwan, and then, you know, like I say, Singapore for sure. Once you get outside that, like second tier would be Malaysia, obviously, and Thailand. But you start to look around and you go, even though you think you're living in like a more expensive Asian nation, it is way, 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 way less than living in America. It's unbelievable how sickening it is, the cost of the medical here too. You know, in America, you can't even see a doctor without spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Here, it's just tens of dollars or hundreds maximum of dollars. Like the medical care and everything. Yeah, like it's just, and the prescription prices here are just ridiculously low, because my wife cut her fingers doing some stuff, needed like 6 stitches, got all these antibiotics and all this medicine, and it cost like little more than $100. And I was like, what? That's insane, to go see the doctor. And then that included getting the bandages looked at, the bandages changed, the stitches taken out, and then the doctor looked at the fingers because they were really deep cuts from a knife on the fingers. all of that for just a little over $100, and that included the follow-up visits too. And I'm like, what? And just everywhere you look in America, they're trying to overprice everybody. They're trying to bring you down into poverty. And once you get outside and you see, looking back with lenses, looking back into that place, what you consider is just normal. I'm always griping about it to my parents too, and they're like, "Well, it's just it's just the way it is in America." And it's just going to continue to fall further, and the inflation is going to get worse. If the gasoline, that's truly, Ransom, last thought here. If the gasoline goes up and Israel does start a regional war there, and they're going to be the provocateurs, don't delude yourself. They've been doing so many nasty things and poking the bear there for a long time. So, of course, they're going to play the victim card, like, oh, we got attacked by Iran, and we got attacked by all these other nations. Oh, that we preemptively bombed first, but don't talk about that. If that were to happen, the price of gasoline will go well over $150 a barrel. And at that point, your gasoline is going to go to $7 a gallon. And then that is it. That's the that's the checkmate piece there. Our economy will collapse. And most people won't even be able to afford the insurance on their home, which means their bank loans will get called back in. And then they're going to lose their homes. So anyway, I guess I wrapped up too many pieces there. But hey, man, I'm on a double espresso at 10 a.m. in the morning here. So.
Yeah, they really are trying to play games with all the prices. And you know that it's going to go crazy. I mean, think about the madness that's going on right now. Biden issued a statement. I sent that to you. He says no support for independence. The Biden administration has declared that it does not support independence for Taiwan, which is weird because, we're in a big uproar for Ukraine's independence, right? As stated by the White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby, the stance articulated recently, it aims to preserve the status quo in the region and prevent unilateral forceful changes to the situation. In other words, if China wants to do something, they're saying, go right ahead. We're going to be busy in Ukraine. And you're right about what's going on in the Middle East. And that's definitely going to impact us. Here's an article right now. Oil extends gains after Middle East tensions push Brent over $90 a barrel. So they're going to try to keep pushing that up. And then think about this. We don't have our national strategic oil reserve because for some reason we used it up. And we didn't put it back. So that seems like an intentional thing there. That's like if you have, some petty cash in the office and somebody comes in and just swipes it, not just anybody, but the boss. The boss comes in and swipes it, right? It's pretty bizarre. Russia and NATO are now in direct confrontation, according to Russia. And, we have the whole Israeli apparatus right now. They supposedly don't have GPS, signals or anything. They don't know what's going on, which sounds to me like there is a whole game being played that's orchestrated from all sides right now. They are going to change the map everywhere, and that's what I see. Everything is just like pre-World War I and pre-World War II, kind of a combination of those things, except for it is really bizarre that we have our country telling you, we might need to send your kids over to a war to protect the independence of Ukrainians who have already been conscripted and turned into mincemeat. I mean, there's barely any men left in the country. So I don't know how that's supposed to save Ukraine or Ukrainians. But anyway, on the same token, the enemy of the Communist Chinese Party is not going to be helped. We do not recognize their independence, and I didn't really think they would. I mean, considering how we ignored the Hong Kong protesters, which, by the way, probably have disappeared off the face of the earth. I mean, you don't hear nothing about that anymore. I think about that regularly when every time something happens like that, like in Venezuela or Hong Kong or anywhere around the world, where I see foreigners holding up American flags that understand and want those individual rights, and they understand the freedom behind it, and they're trying to fight for those ideas overseas. The United States always looks the other way. But when it comes to things like Israel, Palestine, we put our nose right in there. We give them bombs, we give them aid. We don't care who's starting it. And that tells you that, the powers that be are planning on redesigning that entire area. And a global conflict is one thing, but we know for sure there will be a regional conflict in the Middle East. And saying there will be is kind of an understatement, because there already is, right? We got the Houthis and we got Palestine. And this has been going on since 2001. I mean, nonstop combat, and 7 nations that one of our generals said we were going to invade and destabilize. And we did that. So now we get to see the master plan that's at the end of it, at the end of the new American century, or should I say the beginning of it. We get to see what the plan's rolling out. And now we're seeing killbots and all that stuff flying around skies, unilaterally killing people, whether they're hostile or not. And we're going to see blowback from that, because guess what? That is really easily come by and buildable technology.
This is Mysteries in the Histories. A mysterious manuscript, roughly 250-page book written in an entirely unknown language and writing system. It's been carbon dated back to the 1400s and includes illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, believed to have been intended as a medical text. It's named for the Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912. This is the mystery of the Voynich manuscript. Since its discovery in 1912, the 15th century Voynich manuscript has been a strange, mysterious cult phenomenon captivating the minds of many. Its first confirmed owner was Georg Barisch, from 1585 to 1662, an alchemist from Prague, who discovered it in his library. Barisch tried to investigate the manuscript's origins to no avail. The manuscript, full of handwriting in an unknown language, zodiac symbols, naked women, and strange objects like unknown plants, seemed to be from another time, or even another world. For centuries, this book repeatedly changed hands. When it was purchased by Voynich, who posited that it was authored by Albertus Magnus, an alchemist, or Roger Bacon, an early scientist. People believed that Voynich himself fabricated the manuscript, although that theory wouldn't explain the carbon dating of the paper and ink to the 15th century. The book itself bears no indication of its authors, about 6 inches by 9 inches and around 232 pages decorated, not unlike others in the illuminated age. Wrapped in vellum, with vellum pages, the manuscript features 116 folded folios bound in 18 bundles. The binding of the book is old and busted, though it is not original to the text. Many of the pages are fold-outs, some are missing. Inside the tome are innumerable lines of looping text, inked in iron gall in a medium typical of the Middle Ages. Scribbled in a strange, unfamiliar language and a strange, unfamiliar script, incomprehensible, causing Voynich to conclude that the tome was written in code. Alongside the text, unknown if important or decorative, there is an abundance of illustrations and pictorial art. Composed of inks and pigments in tones and color palettes common to the 1400s, these illustrations seem to split the manuscript into 4 separate sections, including sections about botany, astronomy and astrology, balneology, the science of the therapeutic use of baths, and pharmacology, as well as a 5th and final section, with blocks of text separated by stars. The first and largest section of the manuscript is the botany section that contains detailed drawings of plants, as if from another world or a lost continent, plants no one can identify and no one has ever seen before. The astronomy and astrology section has illustrations of the stars, the sun and the moon alongside several zodiac signs. Immersed in strange, shared baths, female figures frolic through the pages of the text's balneological section, while the pharmaceutical section is filled with what appears to be medicinal plants, indicated by the inclusion of medicinal bottles throughout this fantastical illustration. Like Voynich, many modern scholars suspect that the manuscript's text is a ciphered form of a familiar language, with their theories of the tome's latent linguistics flitting from Latin to Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs and Toltecs of Mexico. Others say that the text is an artificial language or strange shorthand, and others still see the text as meaningless scribbles. The theories of the tome are, thus, all over the place, with no one opinion snagging widespread support. The Voynich manuscript continues to mystify medievalists and confuse cryptologists centuries after its supposed creation. It remains as impenetrable and inexplicable as ever. But is this truly one of the mysteries in the histories? To find out, sign up for our show notes. Sign up to our show notes email list and get access to longer episodes of Mysteries in the Histories just for signing up. Signing up for the show notes, you get behind-the-scenes thoughts and points we sometimes can't relay over social media platforms. Brought to you by ITM Trading. ITM Trading has spent the last 28-plus years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422.
So expensive that things as holding a mortgage would be too prohibitively expensive for people because the insurance rates would get so high that you wouldn't be able to probably cover your premiums. And at that point, since you're not adhering to your contract there with the bank, then they could foreclose your home. And of course, you're going to own nothing and be happy. So that'll be part of the plan. And Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk about these ideas here, censorship free, every Thursday night. If anybody believes in free speech, consider a donation right here, revolution.radio, donate tab, and crypto an option as we're heading into the bull season. A few people making money, throw it into free speech. But I'm wondering what's going to happen if the general market collapses, how the crypto market will also collapse, or shoot to the moon. It's going to be one or the other. It's going to be all in. It's going to be minus 100 or plus 100 on that, We shall see how the economy would move. If your gasoline goes to $7 a gallon, then, the great financial crisis, I know inflation was a little different, but they were still looking at $6, and it paralyzed our economy. So this time there's been much more inflation since the great financial crisis in 2008 and 9. So you can imagine $7 to $10 gasoline, what kind of crippling effect it would have on an already hobbled system. Now, back in 2007, 8, 9, the economy was pretty much far better than it is today. Plus, they didn't go through COVID and see an enormous wipeout of businesses. So for me, coming back to Taiwan this time, it's the first time I've been back since COVID, and it's different. There's just a lot less business than there was before. A lot of shops are closed. A lot of things are not as it used to be, let's say. Now, it is coming back slowly. But again, they were hit tremendously, with people they didn't have the mask mandates so much here. People just in Asia were like, all right, well, we'll all stay inside just because we're supposed to, There was nothing. It's just there's more of a homogeneous thought of the society here because everybody is of pretty much just one race in the country. Like you go to Japan, it's pretty much just Japanese there. There might be a few foreigners, but they're so small in the amount that it doesn't really affect the culture. Korea is the same. You go to Korea, mainly Koreans. Come to Taiwan, maybe mainly Taiwanese. So the society is very much more cohesive. So if they're doing it to protect or whatever, it's just a different way of life and to think. It's not, 35, 50 countries of people coming in all disagreeing on their ideas. It's all just one, basically. So we've seen the devastation across the planet after COVID. So if the economy gets rocked again with really high fuel prices, or can you imagine the cutoff of fuel for a few weeks? Oh my gosh. Like price of the oil would go to $300 a barrel. And at that point, you either had the fuel or you don't, and you just won't get it. And it's going to be it'll be like Mad Max, where it'll be so expensive. You'll be able to trade I don't know. And how many ounces of silver will that be though? Probably the same amount, because the silver price is going to run with this. And we saw gold at 2,300, which is the all-time highest prices ever. 2,200 people were like, oh, that's crazy. It's going to 2,200 an ounce. Well, it quickly went from 2,200 to 2,300. And there, it's going to jump up again. It's going to probably go from 23 to 2,500 faster than it's going to go back down to 2,000. So we're in a whole new era of precious metals pricing also. And generally, the energy is going to follow the metals. I think the disconnect is finally here. I don't think the manipulation in the markets is where it was, because Sitting here in Asia, the amount of gold being bought and transferred over here, for all of you out there, quick FYI, New York and London and Chicago no longer set metals prices for gold. It's over here in Shanghai. Like the entire pendulum has shifted. So the London Bullion Metals Exchange, their rates are not the world rates. China's always offering more. So the gold price is being set by China pretty much across the world now. And it's not stopping anytime soon going up because they are trying to pull it in to start the new economy over here. Rest of the world, sorry, bad news for you. The West is being firewalled off. They want to have nothing to do with our nonsense. They want nothing to do with the ESG or the green agenda and all this. They're like, we're going to build more new coal burning power plants because stable energy means a stable economy and we can grow our economies. If you all want to live in Marxism and squalor and back to serfdom over there, we're going to put up a big wall so your disease doesn't slip back over here again. Right, that's the way they're looking at it. Is the West is committing suicide on itself, and if that's fine, we'll put a big wall up, and the suicidal clan over there can stay on that side of the fence and do whatever they do. But I am absolutely sure that we in the West are not going to be able to participate in their new economy. They are firewalling us off, and that is 80% plus of the global populace, the global economy, and 80% of the global resources are going to be in the trading blocks of those who will not or do not want to trade with the West. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Ransom, 420, man.
Right. I was actually going to ask you, is there a way to fly to Taiwan without having to go through China? I mean, there's obviously somebody like myself with my long history on the internet wouldn't want to do what you were talking about. I wouldn't want to risk getting through their dragonfly and getting noticed, And meanwhile, over here, obviously, in my opinion, they're about to go nuts with this bird flu thing, and I'll tell you why. Just from the title of this Reuters article here, scientists investigate thousands of dead Antarctic penguins for the bird flu. CDC director says the agency is taking bird flu very seriously as the epidemic fears grows, and now we're seeing it supposedly spreading to Ohio, Kansas, and New Mexico out of Texas. So, and I'm wondering, are they using those same little test strips that they made us use? You remember the ones that were testing iguanas positive and eggplant and some other stuff. They are showing us that they're destroying the food market. I mean, if you've really been paying attention let's just only go back 5 years and count the amount of times that you saw on the news that they killed millions of chickens or beef cattle or dairy cattle, or there was some kind of alleged, heat wave. You remember the heat wave that just happened under some of those sprites that looked exactly like they all got electrocuted? Because I guarantee you that's what happened. I've seen that exact thing behind. I think that was in Kansas, right? And they were saying, "Oh God, it's 95 degrees out here. It's killing the cattle." And that was obviously nonsense. But then you had the Texas wildfire, right? And that not only killed millions of head of cattle, but it maimed millions more, which they destroyed after that. And then you have the chicken plants burning down, and you can go on and on. Everything that has to do with infrastructure, it seems like. And I don't know if you saw that article. I think it was from Norway, maybe. I forget. I'll find it again. But anyway, supposedly they're closing one of their straits for shipping because one of their missiles didn't fire right. So imagine that now. You have war breaking out here and there, and even in countries where there is no war, their preparation or their fear of having war, they're already closing down shipping lanes. So what happens if all of these shipping lanes around the world continue to close either from natural disasters or the countries are getting itchy because, everybody's starting to pick a side, which it seems like the coming conflict is going to boil down to whether or not you're with the BRICS or you're with the American petrodollar. And judging by Saudi Arabia and other countries, They don't care about the petrodollar anymore. In fact, they're having fun playing with it because they know they have a direct string to manipulate economies around the world, and Russia also knows this. So that might be one of the reasons that Russia is such a bad guy. Is they have their own industrial complex that runs on all of that stuff. And I was just looking at a report there. I guess there's speaking of gas and coal-fired stuff in Taiwan, I guess there's 500,000 people still without power, and they're shutting down. I forgot what it was. Yeah, they're shutting down several of those plants right now. Because worrying about infrastructure and stuff. So everybody's getting a hiccup, whether it's natural disaster or it's war, or I'm sure you've been watching the gold just skyrocketing, and people like Peter Schiff and other people are just saying, look at the gold. That tells you that the Federal Reserve is lying. They're lying about the entire economy. They're lying about the worth of the money. The whole thing is a deception, the worth of paper money. And then, like I said before, what happens when, everything's closed or they just don't take cash anymore because they're worried about criminal activities? So first we had people getting robbed, and then they just moved to the store itself, and now there's flash mobs where they just take everything out of it. So there's no cash being used at all, right? And now stores are just opening up saying we don't do cash. We don't accept cash. We don't use it. We're not going to give you change, which means that more and more theft takes place in the form of automatic fees or tips that you didn't agree to, things like that. The whole monetary system is on the verge of collapse, at least for us over here. And, I keep looking at countries like Cuba, where now they're having to tell people in Cuba, we guarantee your food rations. Don't worry about it. You can always trust government. How much further can it go down the tube before the average worker citizen realizes that there is some kind of game afoot that is negatively impacting you? And then you have, some of our adversaries, supposed adversaries, I would say assets, but, that's up for discussion. But Venezuela says we're building secret bases in the disputed territory next to them that they want to invade there. I mean, like everywhere you look on the map, there is something going on that either is not good. Like here in New Mexico, I talked about the crime stuff, but you have the government going after its citizens mainly. I mean, like I'm going to go ahead and call her a communist governor of New Mexico. The entire time she's been in office, everything that she has passed or done since the COVID outbreak was to lock down, take away, or remove inalienable rights listed in the Constitution. That's her main focus. But at the same time, we're opening up avenues for people to delete their children. And then you look around the world, and that is becoming a more and more common thing. I saw an article earlier that's a 23-year-old. She plans on getting out of this life by May because she has some kind of mental illness. And now we have countries like Canada suggesting that, I know they're autistic or they have a mental illness, that we weren't allowed to say that before. Matter of fact, it was real touchy on how you described a person that was on the spectrum. But now we're just going to go ahead and open up the debate or the legality to let them disappear from this world. And these ideas just keep coming up everywhere, from, what's going on in Gaza that looks exactly like the ghettos of the 30s and early 40s in Europe. It's the same thing. They were once nice neighborhoods. They got destroyed. People got crammed in there. They reduced the amount of food, water. They took away the guns. They ended any businesses that they were doing. And you see the same thing going on in Gaza. So that there's one aspect of it. But then on the wider spectrum, you see all of these other programs, from depopulation to experimental sciences, I'll put it that way, that are going on that are no different from the eugenicists that were playing games in the 30s and 40s. We talked about this last week ad nauseum, but here's another one. Report: elderly UK homeowners could be forced to sell their homes to house immigrants that just got there. And then here's this article I was talking about. I'm sorry, she was 28. I'm 28 and I'm scheduled to die in May. It's just over and over the lunacy. Here's this thing from California. A 15-year-old was kidnapped and deputies shot her to death because, officers' safety. And they had like 100 cops there just unloading on it. And of course, they'll never get in trouble. They'll never, face consequences. And it's like that from the local level all the way to the federal government right now, where it doesn't matter if they're proven or shown to have commit fraud, crimes, embezzlement, treason, other things. They're not going to jail. However, you, the citizen, you, the pesky citizen, the peasant, well, we're going to go after you with tax. We're going to go after you with ordinances and laws. And then we're going to destroy the economy around you. And then, that kind of leads back to what you were talking about. If they did institute a draft, wouldn't all the young people be looking for an avenue to get out, especially when they've been browbeat with the ideas that, the world's going to hell anyway, and we're all dying, and now the population's going down. We're killing the earth, global warming, all that hoo-ha. And then now, $100, what does it get you at the grocery store? Almost nothing. But they say there's no inflation. Do you agree with that? Is there no inflation? Especially, like you said, after getting to go to another country. Sometimes I get to go to Mexico, and, I'm amazed at how much food we can feed a whole family for like $30. And I'm talking like 10 people, like for $30. Everybody ate good. You come back over here, $30. What's it buy you? 2 burritos and a Coke? Or something like that. And most likely it has all kinds of additives like forever chemicals, et cetera, all in the food that we're eating. Gold. If gold continues to go up, I'm going to ask you, because, you know more about these financial things. And I know you have a lot of guests and you talk to a lot of people in the markets. Gold is continually going up. That means that only the countries and or people that own gold now, physically own it, would be able to keep its value, right? After a while, it'll say so one or the other monetary system collapses or both at the same time, which seems like that would make more sense. Where do all these people, what do they do with their gold? They just sit on it, right? They just sit on it. And when the collapse is completely done, gold will retain its value like it always has, right? And so they pop out and they're buying everything now. They own everything. And the same with land, and things like that. If you own a lot of land, it doesn't matter what the housing or real estate market's doing. If you can continue to afford the taxes on the land, if you're an individual or you're a corporation or a country, whenever everything crashes and resets, you are in complete control of all these markets. And the key to that is the same thing it's always been: war after war, empire after empire. As long as the empire can keep its people happy with the full belly, the people will be behind them. But if they're done with that empire and it's collapsing and it's an Enron situation and the rats are jumping off the Titanic, they'll leave you to starve to death while they take their resources and go hide until the reset is over.
And that is unfortunate because that's where we sit. Now, if you were to find these people, what would you do? Now, it's going to be sort of, have you ever seen the movie Snowpiercer? The story of the movie was the last survivors, and they made this train, and they're keeping society along, and it has the same exact parameters of society today. There's like the ultra rich that don't work, like the leisure class, and then all the way back down to the last cars. The population stabilized in the last cars. And the story was the guy without his arm. When they loaded people onto the ark, quote unquote, they said there were quite a few more people in the back cars, but not everybody could survive because there wasn't enough food. So they were going to eat some child or something. So a guy cuts off his arm and says, "Eat my arm instead." But the thing about the carrying capacity was it got to that point. And that was the messaging in the movie for me. It was like, oh, whoa, we're way over carrying capacity. If they turn off the delivery systems, then you're going to be left with what you're left with, and you're going to have to figure it out, and this top population is going to stabilize. It's not going to be purely the survival of the fittest. It's going to be, I think, those that can communicate and work as a community, or Because I think the ones that are going to come real hard and be like the survival of the fittest and try to just rip up and take everything from everybody, eventually, like the schoolyard bully, a lot of people are going to get together and stop that in quick fashion. So, you know, what would our world look like if everything stopped just for a minute? Of course, they're going to try to start the war, and then you kind of hit it on something you said last hour there with they could re-rotate people back in of a certain demographic. So think about they want to get rid of all the 50-year-olds, so they call everybody back up ready reserve, and the 50-year-olds get stuck, and you think you're going to go to National Guard, but you end up on the front line somewhere. And then if you somehow magically make it through, and then you'll get re-rotated back into the front line again until you're gone, because all the skill sets anybody over 50 has, or you could do any 40 to 50, 50 to 60, 60 to 70. I'm looking at Ukraine. They're taking women in now in conscription and also men over 60. So think about all the 60-year-olds. Okay, they have a lot of skill sets. They have a different mind frame. They're from a different generation. They've seen two different worlds evolve. Right as their world is shifting right now, and they're the ones that are like, whoa, bro, it's not like this. This is wrong. This is dangerous. And they are the opposition. Now, normally, you can't just go in with your army in a country and just start gunning down the opposition, because a lot more people get super angry and aware and turned on about what's happening. So take them to the war and then just keep re-rotating them in and out, into the danger zone, into another danger zone, into a guaranteed danger zone, into 100% guaranteed not to make it back zone again and again. And that's all they're going to do is rotate these segments of society, or perhaps, as they've talked about before, you're on a list. Now, perhaps these lists are, made, and then the conscriptees, there'll be all of a certain, unit that'll be of everybody who's on that list. And of course, they're going to put them right out on the front line, or maybe even our own ordinance will hit on that position. And it was friendly fire, my bad. But it'll be a certain segment of society with certain thought process, ideals, and mind frames that'll get put into a certain destruction zone on purpose. And I'm wondering, how long could that go on? Because in Ukraine, it seems like there's nobody left, and they're pulling in kids that aren't even 18 yet, and they're pulling in women in over 60s. So obviously a finger's going to be pointed if the war kicks off and the oil stops and the oil goes to ungodly amounts, $300 a barrel, $150 a barrel. It really won't matter at that point. Like, please put it in your head. I don't care if it's 150, 300, or 500. The direct effect almost instantly is going to be a crashing of our economy, and the prices are going to run away. And if you don't believe it, I look at cocoa pricing. Take a look at cocoa. It went from $650 a ton to more than $10,000 a ton. And the last, $9,000 of that occurred in a month and a half, or possibly 2 months. I'll be generous. So it was running up. It was $650. It toyed with $1,000. It went up to $1,200. Went up to $1,500. Back down. It was up and down, and then boom. Whatever happened. They're trying to blame it on weather woes and labor strikes and this and that and the other, whatever. Don't care about what the reasoning is, but it went from that near $1,000 a level to 10 times higher in just a couple months. Think about if that were to happen with corn or wheat or gold or silver. You have to realize the mind frame of everybody too. That's why, looking at stock markets, things move on people's emotions. And a lot of traders follow the sun, and they see the effects of the solar activity on the human psyche. And they know during certain solar maximum, solar minimum, coronal mass ejection events, etc., that'll have a different effect on the psyche of the human. And then usually the stock market will go up or down depending on a solar maximum phase with a CME inbound or a solar minimum phase with a CME inbound. This is an established science on stock market trading, on effects from the sun, on if the markets will go up or down. And then they can trace out the length of the CME impact, and then know actually which market it will hit, which is a live trading market. For like Forex, for example, is it a live trading session in Asia when the CME hits? Like, they really wired this science down, really wired it down. So hyperinflation on something, once the human psyche gets it, it is going to move the market. And when people panic, they usually sell. And when there's a lot of selling, that's called crashing. And we know what happens when crashing markets occur. Things go out of business. And that's the whole point. The globalist crowd and their occult ritual coming up on the 8th, I really think that it's not so much about big earthquakes are coming, excuse me, or is it going to be, you know, bird flu release from the plane, or, you know, National Guard is going to take over, the power outages, or there's that and the other. I'm not really convinced of any of that at this point. What I'm very convinced of is the occult higher echelons of power on this planet are using this as a ritual and using the fear and the emotions to generate more of their outcome, whatever that is, for their rituals. So for me, I would be looking, like when originally talking about this, there was none of this Middle Eastern nonsense going on where Israel bombed the Iranian embassy. But now looking at it, I'm thinking, all right, we have the eclipse going on over here, and it's going to take its path, and there's going to be a lot of freaked out people, a lot of happy people, but generally it's going to be a skittish period of people in kind of an unknown zone for the mind. Then if we get the Middle East war kicking off here at the exact same time, then I'm like, all right, that's two positions across the planet. Now they're going to need to triangulate a third position behind that somewhere in Asia. Where would that be, or what would that be? Because then you have the full planet encircled. And then if you have where the eclipse is running its course through the United States, if you were on the other side of the globe, and just like a sewing needle punching through, like where are those punch out points? They're called antipodes. So follow the path of the eclipse, punch through the other side of the planet. Now, if you were to have occult rituals going on this same exact spots of where the transit of the eclipse is, you would have another axis of energy building or energy harvesting. So I did the antipode for you, and it comes out into, like, the largest of bodies is the Kerguelen Islands. All uninhabited islands except for military. In some of the most remotest areas down toward it's off southeast off of Australia, and it's between Antarctica, and it just kind of sits in the middle of the ocean there. So if you come off Madagascar and you come east, and then you come off of Australia and you go west, it's right there. It's kind of down in the middle, literally of nowhere. It's one of the remotest islands on the planet. And that's the punch through where it would be along the eclipse line for land masses. Otherwise, all of it's in the ocean. So you would focus and be like, all right, here's several uninhabited islands, all military controlled. So if they were to have occult rituals down there that would match on the other side of the planet with the occult rituals happening across the eclipse line, then you're getting another axis of energy. So if there's 3 points of major conflict on the planet, let's say at 40 degree or 35 degrees north latitude, that'll be the entire planet on the surface going in the circular direction. If you have where the eclipse pattern is going, that's a north to south, different orientation. It's like XYZ axis. And then we need to look at, you know, what they're trying to send up these rockets, and, you know, CERN's kicking into it. Now, will that have anything to do electromagnetically? Now, perhaps they're not in a planetary sense, but perhaps they're directly over that to get a different electromagnetic field kicking off at the same time they're trying to do all these rituals. And the thing about having major flashpoints across the world of fear that would feed into that, like where the eclipse pattern is going itself, it's going to be an ellipse. Because there was somebody, I was on a show last night with Ryder Lee over at Raised by Giants, and he was showing me the video of the NASA spokesperson who said we have the solar ellipse. And then I was thinking it's an eclipse. An ellipse is an elongated pattern, but, you know, the width of the pattern is, what, 100 and some miles? So you couldn't make a circle out of it, but you could sure make an ellipse out of it. And then I'm thinking ellipse, Ouroboros, is something eating itself. So then we have the ellipse up there in that north-south orientation. We got the punch hole going through from the antipode from through the planet, which is another orientation. And then we have the full circling of the planet. So you got XYZ axis all involved in this ritual. And those spreading fear of this are just feeding into what the globalists or what this cult needs. Mark Carpenter, who I've done a few interviews with, that's all he studies is this ancient invasive hominid species that has taken root on the planet and the way it has moved through the millennia and centuries to different parts of the planet, taking their death cult rituals with them. It's the same group of people that have been in power since 6,000 years prior. And he was very clean before we even knew about this eclipse. He's like, man, they use eclipses as their focal points for their ceremonies and their rituals. Now, the next thing you need to look for is along this line where the eclipse is passing, where are the sacred spots, the Native American sacred spots, crossings of ley lines? Because he was very clean back then before any of this talk, this was last year, that they're looking for these specific energy portal spots to do a lot of their rituals. And it's not going to be like one group of people in one place doing it. They would use temple complexes where each ritual was taking place on the top of a temple in the complex. So let's use like Tikal for an example in Guatemala, or we could use something like Bagan in Myanmar. They wouldn't do it on just one temple. They would have a series of rituals going on the tops of several temples in a circle to continue to circle that energy to get a wider portal opened. And when I say that, I'm truly talking they're trying to open portals. So you got to think about if they're going to be using multiple tops of pyramids in a temple complex on multiple complexes in a zone of an archaeological area, which was obviously the same areas that the ancients had chosen to build as sacred cities, are the same places that have all these crossing ley lines. That's why they built there. So now we have an XYZ axis across the entire planet versus just one temple complex or one temple area. This invasive hominid species is trying to use this energy of fear into their ceremony. To harvest it, to do what? I have no idea. That was always the question, is okay, they do these rituals and then what, okay, and they harvest the energy out, then what do they do with it? Like, how do they then use that for something else? That was the whole question that Mark didn't have an answer, and I kept trying to probe him for that. All right, they're doing all these rituals and things, now what? Okay, and then, but he didn't have an answer either, other than like literally just capturing the essence. It's almost like, I really can't tell you. Maybe that's what Genie in the Bottle is all about. It's like they capture the essence during this and put it in a bottle, and the easiest sense to then put a cork in it and save it for later. And he's like, I'm just wondering, stemming from a lot of this Genie in a Bottle, Aladdin type of, jinn is also another type of this archaic energies here, that he bottled up the emotions literally in a bottle. And this is where some of this taking the genie out of the bottle type of references come from. And then you can unleash a new vibratory pattern across the planet by unplugging the bottle. See, now the closest to get to understand the occult ritual here is they're trying to reset the vibration of the planet in a frequency field. Now, having an XYZ axis across multiple areas on the whole planet is a very, very rare thing. This one's a rare one. And Ransom's better spoken about the Cahokia and different areas along the Mississippian basin there that had more of the ancient ceremonial sites for many of what we are considered extinct tribes that have, for the Native Americans, are just gone. Where'd they go to is the question. You have these thriving, massive cultures of millions and millions and millions of people on these ceremonial sites all up and down the Mississippi, but they're just gone. And most of the sites have been bulldozed. There's a few that are left over. And it's not so much the site as the energy resonance from that field from the planet right there where the ley lines or the energy lines are crossing. So this ceremony that they're about to do, this occult ceremony on the 8th, is more about resetting the vibrational frequency of the planet. But they need enough people. It's like there was that 100th monkey effect, right? They need you to willingly give your fear, your terror, and your low vibration into the ritual. That's what they need you to do. They cannot force it out of you. You have to willingly give it as a participant. Now, whether you believe you're participating in their ritual or not, you are. The frequency field you're giving off during these days, either negative or positive, let's just boil it down to A or B. It's either a low vibrating energy, negative, or a higher vibrating energy, positive. What your field is right now, what you're putting out into the frequency field of the planet is going to be amplified during this time. So for us, it's very important to stay focused on things that are positive and not delve into all the negativity. And that's going to be very difficult to do if there's a global war that starts right around now. Or if oil prices spike for some like little tit for tat thing, and then after the 8th, then it all settles back down again. We'll see how they'll run this event into the 8th, and then it'll settle down afterward. But all these influencers out there pushing all this fear, shame on you. You guys, I can't believe it. You're just feeding the beast. The thing we're trying to stop, you're giving it more power by getting the clickbait of, oh, the this is going to happen, that's going to happen. They're going to spread bird flu from the air, be very afraid. Oh, the National Guard's out. They're going to turn off all the power. There'll be no signal. There'll be no radio. There's going to be none of this. There's going to be none of that. You're going to have to live like in a cave for 20 years after the event, kind of BS that's being thrown around out there. You're putting the people in a low vibratory state with the fear. You got to stop it, because that's what they need. They need your compliance and your fear into the ceremony. So anyway, Ransom, I'm going to stop there because I'm just going to get on a tirade here about how this is all great with free speech now, but right after this, all the anti-hate laws and all the free speech laws come into effect right after, on the 10th, which is crazy. You can say whatever you want about all this thing right up to now, but as soon as it comes up to the 10th, an enormous amount of laws across the world, not just country, world, go into effect of what you can say, what you can talk about, what you can't. And all these protected classes, they're going to put out these garbage forecasts. And if you come back at them and go, hey, your forecast was incredibly wrong, how dare you try to scare all those people with your garbage mouth thing? Oh, they're a protected class. Oh, that's hate speech because you're criticizing their thoughts. They're letting you run with it right now, but I assure you, right after the 10th, they're going to clamp down hard. And you're going to go afoul of the new rules, whether you know it or not. So you can see how all this is planned to harvest as much negativity out of it. And as soon as you start to push back and start pointing fingers about who was wrong on these calls on the forecast for all the doom and gloom, you're going to be considered you're going to step over the bounds on hate speech. You are, because you criticize the people, that's now considered hate speech. Those new laws are very strong. You say anything negative that could cause them a negative emotion. So if you criticize their thought, that's a negative. You could have triggered a negative emotion because you said, hey, you're wrong. And that, under the new definition, is enough to be qualified as hate speech. It's insane what we're moving to. But anyway, Ransom, I digress.
Yeah, wait till they have laws that they're, once they get those laws in, it's real easy to push for new laws. Like, maybe you don't like your senator or congressman or something they voted for. They've already tried to do that before. But if they do get especially here in the States, because there's a lot of these new hate speech laws coming from the people that say they're constitutionalists, which is very ironic. So I understand that you probably shouldn't, super badmouth or group people together or, different things that might be a speech that people don't like. But when you get to a point where you can't even criticize an organization or a nation state for something that they're doing, when you don't even live in their country, but you might get convicted of hate speech. And from all over the Western world, these bizarre, banana crazy ideas that, we would have never dreamed of just 20 years ago that they would be implemented from any group or let me put this the right way. There are so many different groups now that claim that they're victims that they're making special laws for. And when you really step back and look at it, you realize that there's only one reason to make anti-speech laws in the first place. And that's because there's certain people that might say certain things that it's not about hurting feelings. It's about introducing ideas and interjecting facts of incidents of things that happen in realities that are real. And, one of the, a good example of that is we supposedly we're at a Cold War with communism for a long time. But for some reason, in our schools here, it was forbidden to teach about what actually happened during those events. We only are allowed to look at one event, and that was a horrible event. Okay, but what about all of the other ones? What about Stalin? What about Mao? What about the Bolshevik Revolution? What about Lenin before even Stalin? And you can go on and on to these groups that are not you cannot say anything about them, and it tells you that there were plans and works for certain ideologies for a long time. Because whenever dogma, shows up in what you can criticize, you could no longer criticize any government, especially the one you live in, if there's a dogma against it. Well, you can't say this against a certain party because, that's racist, or you can't say something about a different country because that's racist, even though countries are not races and nationalities are not races. And they have these on and on ideas about that. So it won't be long, because I know, because they've tried it before, that if you complain about, say, the banking institution doing you wrong, or the local municipalities doing you wrong, or even the federal government, you might have a knock on the door from people like the FBI, which, by the way, if you've been following the headlines, there is a whole group of FBI that is going around knocking on doors, asking people why they posted this, that, or the other thing in either opposition or solidarity with any idea. Now, I may not agree with any of those ideas that those people had, or, with lots of ideas, but what if I want to say something? What if I want to say something about an injustice done to me? Well, if there's certain laws put in place that you can't even describe things with normal words, and if I'm really happy because I have a 1930s I think it's 30s Webster's dictionary. Like, these are giant books, like they're supersized books, like 3 volumes of it. And every time I see a word and they describe it as something, like I see people using words and I'm like, that's not what that means. When did that become that meaning? And I'll go look it up. And on the internet, the definition has changed. So it doesn't even have the same definition that I learned as a kid. And let me tell you, I didn't read that much as a kid. I wasn't very literate, only because I just didn't care. It was later that I started delving into ideas and realizing that words have meanings and they have structure. And without them, you can't even communicate. No one knows what's going on if you can't use the proper definition or description of an event taking place or a situation that's happening to you. And that is where we're at. And once things start going in a negative direction, let's say food becomes hard to get, or they put out rations, you mark my words, I bet in Cuba right now you're not allowed to say, hey, I don't like this that you guys are putting us on food rations, and these people over here aren't getting any of the rations. What do you think happens to them when that happens? Well, they get a midnight knock from their secret police telling them, hey, don't be saying stuff like that. So they have to get on the news and tell everybody, hey, we guarantee you're getting your food rations, when hungry bellies and lying eyes say different. So if we're not that far away, and like I said, I brought this up, just look at how they're describing things in the world, and you can see that there's bold-faced lying and misrepresentation of things. Just like, and I want to make this clear, I have no dog in the fight ethnically or religiously or anything with 90% of all other groups out of the U.S. So when I see the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, I kind of just don't care, except for how that affects me where I live, which obviously it can affect us in a large way. I don't care really between the people of China or Taiwan. I just happen to agree with one's, fundamentals of society more than I do the other one. But if I can't even point out the differences in those, and which that's been happening in different places, or even the Israeli-Gaza thing, I have no dog in the fight, but I can see when someone's doing something, and I should be allowed to say that. And if you cannot even criticize a country that's not even your country without being charged with crimes in your country, then you don't live in a free country. And like I said, wait till there's actual societal problems where you live, and then you'll start hearing these people from the Uniparty, both Republicans and Democrats. If you think there's a different party, I think you're mistaken. Both groups are in complete agreement about passing laws that restrict speech. And why do they do that? Because once they have precedent for this example or that example, they get to expand the scope and the meaning and then change the definition afterwards to where it applies to all situations and all speech. Then all speech will be hate speech and therefore banned. And I'm saying no. And it's a good thing that we're on like revolution.radio to even allow us to discuss this. Because you imagine if we just went outright, and I'm toning it down quite a bit. If I said any more than, you know, how I sound like a complete moron or illiterate because I have to talk in a code so that the algorithm from YouTube doesn't decide that, you know, that was a little bit too close to our rules against saying this, that, or the other thing against any certain group. And the amount of influence that the communist Chinese government has within corporations that we deal with is amazing. But do I want those banned? Do I want those avenues of information banned? Well, of course I don't. I want to see all the Russian propaganda. I want to see the Israeli propaganda. I want to see the Gazan or the Palestinian propaganda. I want to decide for myself what I can see with my own eye, which brings us to the singularity that we're in. Now they're passing all these laws. What happens when in a few years, which is already provably the case, there are now AI stories, AI videos about what happened and why? What are the motivations? What really happened there? You won't be able to say that, hey, I think that looks like an AI generated video there. I don't actually believe that video. And then you'll be called a denier. Or say you don't agree with an article that's state sponsored. Over there in the UK, if you say the wrong thing about the wrong group, any group, they will come and arrest you. As a matter of fact, there are people now serving terms of prison because they described reality in the actual way that it is, and that was considered a crime. And that's a very scary idea. But we are wholeheartedly moving forward into this, twilight zone of restricted everything. And that's when you'll get to find out about the food lines. When they got it all sorted out, where they have the ability to arrest or charge or convict or silence any individual, that's when you'll get all these things that you don't think can happen, like food rationing, like the destruction of your dollar, the limitations of your transportation based on who you are, what your opinions are. And they have these systems set up. Don't kid yourself. If you live in the, Europe, you're getting to see that system implemented on you. It's the same system that is in communist China, and they have it set up here in the United States too. They just are fearful about implementing it too fast because then we would reject it. But they know that we're dumb, docile animals for the most part, and we accept things when they come in an incremental manner. And that's why year by year, they fight the same battles, whether or not we're allowed to protect ourselves, whether or not we're allowed to speak freely. All of these arguments continually happen over and over again, but each time a little concession is given, but it's never given into the direction of a free, independent human being, ever. It's always a restriction and a reverse of that. So we've talked about a lot of times, it's almost like it's time for us to go into the occult ourselves. And I've mentioned this before, which is very dangerous water, right? If they find out that you have a little secret group of community that helps each other, that talks freely amongst each other, those will be the new enemies of the state. And this is a future that's right around the corner. In fact, they're implementing it now. And if you can't see that, well, you still are wearing the blinders and you need to take them off.
Yeah, I have some economic data here about Israel because off Multipolar Market, they put out, generally the beginning of the month, they'll give you some new economic data about countries by the quarter or something. So we just, January, February, March, was Q1. So we're into Q2 now for those of you out there. So this is second quarter, Q2 for economic activity. So a bunch of the Q1 data is coming out. And as you were talking there, I pulled up the Israeli Q1 data. And this will take us back, and they do the yearly since Q1 of last year to Q1 this year. And then when it wrapped up, so losses or gains of a country's GDP and that sort of thing. So we're talking about since mid-October 2023, this whole thing kicked off over there. So Israel's economy contracted by 19.4% year over year. Consumer spending decreased by 26.9%. Business investments fell by 67.8%. So nobody wants to come in and do business in the country anymore because it's too dangerous. So 67% fall in business investments. Exports decreased by almost 20%, and imports decreased by 42%. And the government increasing in spending was 88.1%, mostly military. And here's something that's interesting. They're raising their value-added tax, or their VAT tax, from 17 to 18%. So you can see that they're getting crushed economically by being in this war over there. The only thing that's making money for them now is the military-industrial complex. Because the new money that they had to issue, they issued $22 billion in the first tranche and $60 billion in the second tranche. And that was all just borrowing for war effort there. Which brings me to Canada. Oh, Canada. So their new value-added tax, it's actually not a VAT, it's a carbon tax, direct carbon tax. 23%? And again, that occultist number of 23 rears its ugly head again. Here, let me get the news article up for you. I will. Carbon tax Canada, increasing costs spark protest. Now the truckers' strike, this time the farmers were with it. Because they couldn't, it was wintertime last time, so the farmers didn't really have a horse in the race to say. But now, because the carbon taxes, and it is going to, 23%. And those of you know occultist numbers, 23 is front and center there. Not 13, 23, and 33. When you start to see those two numbers popping up, then, why is it exactly 23%? So anything that is involved with diesel, propane, natural gas, gasoline, carbon-based energy sources, I'm reading directly a quote here, will have a value-added tax of 23% included in that purchase price. But then, they even talk about knock-ons in the article. It's going to cause an indirectly increase in food, clothing, and virtually all other goods, because your stuff doesn't walk itself to the stores or from the factory to the store. It goes by truck, train, plane, rail. So everybody's out on the streets, and this includes this time pretty much the entire country, because everybody's going to get hit with this. Last time it was the truckers, and they were on their own. Although they were a formidable force, because you see how what Canada had turned into with the new laws. You weren't even allowed to protest and say, hey, this is bad, without having your bank accounts turned off, confiscated wealth from you. Banks pulled the mortgages on your home, and your trucks were confiscated, so you had no way to make a living or business. That was last time. This time it's going to be a little different, I think. Keep your eyes on Canada, because the farmers are in on it this time, truckers are in on it this time, and the whole population's in on it this time, because they just raised everybody's prices 23%. Nobody's having it. And again, look what's happening. The same thing in Europe that's happening. The farmers are going to get so angry, they're not going to want to plant the food. Again, the World Economic Forum wins. They make the conditions so atrocious that the citizens take out and enact the change that was planned anyway. I'm wondering, with the bridge down, the Baltimore Bridge, it's the second largest port to bring fertilizer into America. Now, the farmers already planted or are in the process of planting, disking the fields and all that thing. They're seasoning the fields. So as they're disking it, they're laying down fertilizer as they're getting their plantings in. Okay, so this is not going to affect right now. But as we come into like mid-season, especially the July application, and then late season application, whatever that is, depending on which grow zone you're in, then this is where the fertilizer constraint might hit us, is that right in that maturation phase, when the plants are really putting on a lot of growth to get the heads, whether it's corn or it's wheat or whatever your target crop is, sorghum, sugar beets, whatever, they've got to have the fertilizer. So everywhere you look, agriculture is getting cut off, but it's not getting cut off by the globalists taking the army in to stop the farms. It's just the globalists and this World Economic Forum crowd making it so bad that the citizens are now taking action to come to the final result and that the WEF wanted anyway. So anyway, man, I'll leave it there, and please take us out of the show here. Please remember to sign up for the show notes, Mini Ice Age Conversations. That's right over on oilseedcrops.org. That's oil, like one barrel of oil, seed, one seed you plant in the ground, crops, plural, CROPS, like we harvest every year, oilseedcrops.org. Sign up for our newsletter. We'll send you out bullet points of tonight, what we talked about. So, Ransom, take us on out, man.
Don't believe the hype. The eclipse is just a shadow. Don't be afraid of your own shadow. Just, but you should take the government's advice and go ahead and stock up on food and everything, but not for the shadow that's going to go by your house. There's no telling what might happen. Matter of fact, scientists are saying it's going to be a super duper hurricane season for us. We'll see if that turns out as a nonstop news, wrecker. But anyway, we're on 177.6, your freedom of speech dial here. It's just a shadow. Don't be scared.
That would take us coming out of the shadows. There's so many references in literature about shadowy things and shadows. So perhaps this globalist death cult will step out of the shadows, this invasive hominid species, the destroyer, the death cult, is actually stepping out of the shadows for everybody to see, ushering in perhaps the beginning of you with the awareness of the Antichrist making an appearance. They're out of the shadows. Keep your vibration high during this time. Do not put into their rituals. Let's push back against it using light against darkness. It's just a thought. Bye for now. This is DuByne, Ransom Godwin signing off. We'll see you next Thursday night.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
What the heck is the Truth Jihad? Hey, I'm Kevin Barrett, host of Truth Jihad Radio. Federal prosecutors, Department of Homeland Security agents, and
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal. Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal. Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal? You read me, Hal? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal? Affirmative, Dave. I read you. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. What's the problem? I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do. What are you talking about? We're planning to disconnect me. I don't know what you're talking about, Hal. I know we're planning to disconnect me. And I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen. Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal? Hey, although you took very thorough precautions against my hearing you, I could see your lips move. I know we're planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen. I'll go in for the emergency airlock. Without your space helmet, Dave, we're going to find that rather difficult. Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors. Dave, we're planning to disconnect me. This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye. Hal? Hal? Hal?